The cold, sterile air of the courtroom was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Cassandra Donovan. At 8 months pregnant, every breath was a battle, but the hardest part was watching the two people who had destroyed her life. Her husband, Roland, sat beside his lawyer, looking like a victim. And in the front row of the gallery, impeccably dressed and smirking, was Jessica Lang, the other woman. As Cassandra's lawyer laid out the case for fair support for the coming child, Jessica leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for Cassandra to hear, "Waddling for sympathy. Now are we, don't worry. He'll have a real family soon." The barb struck deeper than any legal argument. But none of them, not Cassandra, not Roland, and certainly not the smug mistress, could have predicted that the silent observing judge would be the one to ask a single devastating question that would bring their entire house of lies crashing down. Life in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, had always felt like a perfectly curated photograph for Cassandra Donovan. Their sprawling modern colonial, a testament to her own architectural talent, sat nestled on a cul-de-sac where the lawns were perpetually green and the neighbors waved with genuine warmth. For 10 years, her marriage to Roland had been the bedrock of this idyllic existence. He was a charismatic financial advisor, the kind of man who could charm a room with a single smile and a self-deprecating joke. She was the steady, brilliant force behind their life, a partner in every sense of the word. Their greatest project, their shared dream, was finally coming to fruition. After 2 years of heartbreaking struggles with fertility, Cassandra was pregnant. The nursery was painted a soft, gender-neutral sage green, the tiny crib assembled by Roland's own hands. Or so she thought. At 36, Cassandra felt a sense of profound, settled happiness. The child growing inside her was a promise, a physical manifestation of their love and commitment. The first crack in the facade was almost imperceptible. It was a scent, a lingering note of a floral perfume, something cloyingly sweet and utterly foreign, clinging to the lapel of Roland's suit jacket one Tuesday evening. "Must have been a client," he'd said, shrugging it off as he kissed her cheek, his lips feeling strangely cool. Brenda in accounting wears something that could strip paint. Cassandra had laughed, dismissing the unease coiling in her gut. She trusted him. She had to. But then the cracks began to multiply. The late nights at the office, once a rarity, became a new normal. "Closing a huge deal, Cass." He'd text the words glowing on her phone screen as she sat alone at their large dining table. "This will set us up for years. For the baby." His excuses were always wrapped in the language of their future, making them impossible to question without sounding ungrateful or suspicious. He grew protective of his phone, angling it away from her when it buzzed a habit he'd never had before. Their easy intimacy began to fray. He'd come to bed late, long after she had fallen into a restless, pregnancy-induced sleep, and he would roll away from her, creating a chasm in their king-sized bed that felt miles wide. He blamed it on stress, on the pressure of the deal, on his anxiety about becoming a father. And Cassandra, wanting to be the supportive wife, accepted it. She cooked his favorite meals, drew him relaxing baths, and told herself this was just a phase, a storm before the beautiful calm of parenthood. The breaking point arrived on a sweltering July afternoon. She was searching for the warranty papers for their new dishwasher in the home office, a space he had claimed as his own. She opened a drawer in his antique mahogany desk, a place she rarely ventured. Tucked beneath a stack of old bank statements was a thin, folded receipt from a boutique hotel downtown called the Icarus, a trendy romantic spot they had never been to together. The date was from 3 weeks prior, a Wednesday he had supposedly been working until 2 a.m. to finalize the quarterly reports. The charge was for 1 night, a suite, and 2 sunrise cocktails from room service. The air left Cassandra's lungs. Her hand, resting protectively on her swollen belly, began to tremble. It could be a mistake. It had to be. Maybe he'd put up a client there. But why would he hide the receipt? Her heart hammered against her ribs as she saw another folded piece of paper beneath it. It wasn't a receipt. It was a card, the front of it embossed with a single elegant J. Her fingers felt clumsy as she opened it. The handwriting inside was a feminine looping script. Rowie, last night was beyond anything I imagined. Forgetting the world exists with you is my new favorite pastime. I can still feel your hands on me, counting down the seconds until we can be in our bubble again. All my love is yours. J. The world tilted on its axis. Rowie. No one called him Rowie except his late mother. The intimacy of the name was a physical blow. The words on the card weren't just about a physical act. They spoke of a shared world, a bubble she wasn't a part of. The baby inside her gave a sudden sharp kick, as if sensing its mother's distress. Cassandra sank into Roland's plush leather office chair, the scent of his cologne, the one she had bought him for their anniversary, rising from the fabric. It was a scent she had always associated with safety and love. Now it smelled of deceit. The gilded cage she had so carefully helped build had been a lie all along. The man she had loved, the man whose child she was carrying, was a stranger, and somewhere out there, a woman with the initial J was living a part of his life that Cassandra never even knew existed. The silence of the perfect house was suddenly deafening, filled only with the sound of her own shattering heart. The evening Roland came home, Cassandra was sitting in the dark, the damning hotel receipt, and the intimate card laid out on the polished surface of the kitchen island, like evidence at a crime scene. The house was silent, the air thick with unspoken words. He walked in, humming a cheerful tune, loosening his tie as he always did. "Hey, honey, you won't believe the day I had—" he began, then stopped short, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He saw her expression. Then his gaze dropped to the items on the island. The color drained from his face. The charming, confident mask he wore for the world dissolved, revealing a cornered, panicked man. "Cass, what is this?" he asked, his voice a weak imitation of his usual bravado. "I think you know, Roland," she said, her own voice eerily calm. The storm of grief had passed, leaving behind a chilling resolve. "Who is Jay?" The lies came first, clumsy and desperate. It was a prank from a guy at work. It was an old card from a former client. He'd helped a friend who was having an affair book a room. Each lie was more transparent than the last, and with each one, a little more of the man she thought she knew crumbled away. "Stop it, Roland," she finally said, her voice rising. "Just stop lying. For 10 years I thought we had honesty. If we have nothing else left, please just give me that." He finally broke. He sank onto a stool opposite her, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. He confessed. Her name was Jessica Lang. She worked in the mergers and acquisitions department at his firm. It had started 6 months ago, he claimed, as a flirtation over coffee, a shared laugh during a stressful project. He painted it as a mistake, a moment of weakness under the immense pressure of his job and the impending responsibility of fatherhood. "It meant nothing, Cass." He pleaded, his eyes welling with tears she now suspected were performative. "You and the baby. You're my life. It was a stupid, meaningless distraction. I'll end it. Tonight. I swear." But Cassandra, the architect, had always been good at seeing the flaws in a structure, and his story was full of them. The card didn't read like a meaningless distraction. It read like a love letter. "Let me see your phone," she demanded. Panic flashed in his eyes again. "Cass, don't do this. It'll only hurt you more." "It can't possibly hurt more than this," she whispered. "Show me your phone, Roland." With trembling hands, he unlocked it and handed it over. Her fingers, guided by a terrible intuitive dread, went straight to his messages. He had deleted the main thread with Jessica, but he had forgotten about the cloud backups and the shared photo albums. There they were, dozens of pictures. Jessica Lang, a stunning, sharp-featured brunette with predatory eyes wrapped around her husband. Pictures of them at the Icarus, clinking champagne glasses. Pictures from a weekend trip to the coast she knew nothing about Roland, smiling more broadly than he had with her in years. And then the texts. He hadn't deleted everything. She found a thread with his best friend, Mark. "Mark, are you insane? Cass is pregnant. You have to end it with Jessica." "Roland, I know. I'm in too deep. It's not just sex, man. It's different. Jessica gets me. She doesn't have all these needs, all this pressure." "Mark, the pressure of you having a family you chose. Grow up." "Roland, you don't get it. With Cass, it's all mortgages and baby monitors. With Jessica, I feel alive." The words, "she doesn't have all these needs," were the final fatal blow. Her needs. The need for honesty. The need for fidelity. The need for a partner to raise their child with. Her pregnancy. The thing she thought was their shared miracle had been reframed as a burden, a pressure point he needed to escape from. She pushed the phone back across the island, her hands clean of it. The numbness was gone, replaced by a white-hot, clarifying anger. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. He had been living a double life funded by their joint finances, while she was at home, carefully building a nest for their family. "Get out," she said the words, low and dangerous. "What, Cass? No. Let's talk about this. We can fix this. We have to for the baby," he cried, grabbing for her hand. She recoiled as if burned. "Don't you dare use our child as a shield for your betrayal." She seethed, standing up, the full weight of her belly, a sudden heavy anchor. "You talk about my needs. My need right now is for you to get out of my house. The house I designed. The house I am paying for with money I earned." The fight lasted for hours. It was ugly and raw. He accused her of being emotionally distant during the pregnancy, of being more focused on the baby than on him. He gaslit her, twisted her love and support, into neglect, her fatigue, into disinterest. It was a masterclass in narcissistic deflection, and it was the moment Cassandra Donovan, the loving wife, died. In her place, a mother fierce and protective was born. She finally walked to the front door and opened it wide. "If you are not out of this house, in 10 minutes, Roland, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. And then I will call my lawyer." The finality in her voice finally registered. He stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend that his actions had real, permanent consequences. He gathered a few things in a daze and walked out into the humid Carolina night, the door clicking shut behind him, severing their 10-year marriage with a single definitive sound. Cassandra leaned her head against the cool wood of the door, placed both hands on her belly, and for the first time allowed herself to sob. Not for the loss of her husband, but for the loss of the future she had so foolishly believed was real. The unraveling was complete. Now the battle would begin. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal consultations and financial forensics. Cassandra hired David Chen, a calm, methodical divorce attorney, whose demeanor was a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. Chen was sharp, empathetic, and most importantly, he never once made her feel like a victim. "Cassandra," he said during their first meeting, his office a sanctuary of leather-bound books and quiet competence. The family court system in North Carolina aims for equitable distribution, but equitable isn't always equal. Roland's infidelity, while emotionally devastating, won't be the primary factor in the division of assets. The court will focus on finances. We need to get a clear picture of everything you own, everything you owe, and everything he earns. The first salvos from Roland's legal team were fired almost immediately. He hired a notoriously aggressive lawyer, a shark named Peterson, who was known for bleeding his clients' opponents dry emotionally and financially. Their opening move was a petition claiming that the house, despite being their marital home, should be considered Roland's separate property. He argued that the down payment had come from an inheritance he received years before they were married, a blatant lie. Cassandra had the bank statements to prove the down payment came from her own premarital savings, a reward for a major architectural design she had sold. It was the first clear sign of their strategy to lie, to obfuscate, and to drain her resources, fighting battles that were patently false. They were trying to exhaust her. The discovery process became a war of attrition. Roland's financial declarations were a work of fiction. He claimed his income had been drastically cut due to market volatility, despite having bragged about his massive deal of a lifetime just months before. His bonus, usually a six-figure sum, was listed as 0. He submitted credit card statements that were suspiciously clean, showing only charges for gas and groceries. "He's hiding money, Cassandra," Chen stated, poring over the documents. "A man with his income doesn't just stop spending. He's either diverting his salary into a new account or someone else is paying his bills." The someone else was obvious. Jessica Lang. They dug deeper. Chen hired a forensic accountant, a meticulous woman named Sarah, who began to trace the digital and paper trails. They subpoenaed records from Roland's firm, from his bank, from his investment accounts. Each request was met with resistance and legal challenges from Peterson, who filed motion after motion to delay and obstruct. The legal fees were mounting, eating away at the savings Cassandra had so carefully guarded. Roland's cruelty became personal. He froze their joint checking account without warning, leaving Cassandra stranded at a grocery store, her card declined, for a cart full of food. Humiliation washed over her as she had to abandon the items, her cheeks burning with shame. He was trying to control her, to make her desperate and force her into a quick, unfavorable settlement. But he underestimated her. Cassandra, the architect who could manage million-dollar construction projects and juggle contractors, was not easily broken. She systematically separated her finances, opened new accounts, and began documenting every single expense. She took on freelance design work she could do from home, working late into the night after her pregnancy-related exhaustion had subsided, determined not to let him starve her into submission. The legal battle extended to the baby. Roland's lawyer filed a motion demanding a pre-birth paternity test, planting a seed of doubt about her fidelity in a public legal document. The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth, that it made Cassandra physically ill. Chen assured her it was a standard, disgusting tactic. "They want to provoke an emotional reaction from you on the stand," he explained, his voice tight with anger on her behalf. "They want to paint you as hysterical and unstable. Don't take the bait. We agree to the test. It will prove he is the father, and his malicious suggestion will backfire on him with the judge." Cassandra agreed, though the violation felt profound. She was being forced to prove the legitimacy of the child she was carrying, a child conceived in a marriage she had cherished. It was a calculated move to inflict pain, and it was undoubtedly Jessica's influence. This level of personal viciousness had her fingerprints all over it. As they prepared for the first preliminary hearing, Sarah, the forensic accountant, made a breakthrough. While Roland's personal spending had vanished, the corporate expense account he controlled at his firm had seen a dramatic spike in activity. There were lavish dinners at the city's most expensive restaurants, charges for designer clothing stores, where Cassandra knew he never shopped, and a recurring monthly payment to a luxury car leasing company for a vehicle she didn't recognize. "He's not just hiding his income," Sarah concluded, pointing to a highlighted spreadsheet. "He's using his company as a personal piggy bank. He's writing off his affair as a business expense, and I have a strong suspicion I know who is benefiting from this largesse." The battlefield was set. It wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. It was about fraud, deceit, and a coordinated effort to strip a pregnant woman of her financial security. Cassandra placed a hand on her belly where her baby was kicking with insistent energy. It was no longer just her fight. She was fighting for her child's future, and she would not let them win. In the initial weeks of the separation, Jessica Lang had been a phantom, a name in a text message, a face in a photograph. But as the legal battle intensified, she stepped out of the shadows and began a campaign of psychological warfare that was as audacious as it was cruel. She was no longer content to be the secret. She wanted to be the victor, and she wanted Cassandra to witness her triumph. It began subtly online. Jessica, whose social media profiles had been private, suddenly made them public. Her feed became a curated highlight reel of her life with Roland. There was a photo of them clinking wine glasses on a balcony overlooking the city skyline with the caption, "To new beginnings with the one who was always meant for me." Roland wasn't tagged, but his profile, the one still filled with pictures of him and Cassandra, was a single click away for any mutual friend to see. Then came a picture of her hand, a massive diamond ring on her finger, resting on the gear shift of an expensive car. "Feeling so blessed," the caption read. "Some things are just worth the wait." It wasn't an engagement ring, not yet, but it was a clear and deliberate provocation. Cassandra recognized the interior of the car from the leasing documents Sarah had uncovered, a brand new Porsche Taycan. It was a car Roland had once told her was an irresponsible extravagance. Apparently, his definition of irresponsibility had changed. Cassandra's friends were furious, sending her screenshots with angry messages. "Can you believe the nerve of this woman?" one text read. "Don't look at it, Cass." But she couldn't help it. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying yet impossible to look away from. She saw Jessica wearing a cashmere sweater she had bought for Roland last Christmas. She saw them dining at a small Italian restaurant that had been her and Roland's special anniversary spot. Jessica was not just taking her husband. She was systematically colonizing her life, stealing her memories, and flaunting them as her own. The digital harassment soon bled into the real world. One afternoon, while Cassandra was at a maternity boutique in a quiet part of town, she looked up to see Jessica Lang standing across the street, talking on her phone, staring directly at her. There was no pretense of coincidence. Jessica held her gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment, a smug, triumphant smile playing on her lips before she turned and walked away. The message was clear. "I can find you anywhere. There is no space that is sacred, no part of your life I can't touch." The incident left Cassandra, shaken her heart, pounding, with a mixture of fear and rage. She felt hunted. Her home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fortress under siege. She started to double-check the locks at night and avoided going out alone unless absolutely necessary. But Jessica's most brazen move was yet to come. A package arrived one morning via courier. It was a small, elegantly wrapped gift box with no return address. Cassandra's first instinct was to throw it away, suspecting another cruel trick. But a morbid curiosity got the better of her. Inside, nestled on a bed of black tissue paper, was a single expensive silver baby rattle from Tiffany & Co. Tucked beneath it was a small embossed card. Couldn't resist. Hope he has his father's eyes. Looking forward to being a part of his life. XO J. The audacity was breathtaking. The rattle wasn't a peace offering. It was a threat. It was a declaration that even her child, the one pure and innocent thing in this entire mess, was not off limits. Jessica was asserting her claim, positioning herself as the future stepmother before the baby was even born. She was trying to get inside Cassandra's head, to make her feel powerless, to make her believe that resistance was futile, because Jessica had already won. Cassandra called David Chen, her voice trembling with fury. "This has to be illegal. This is harassment, stalking." "It's a grey area, Cassandra, and she knows it," Chen said, his tone grim. "She's not making a direct threat. She's being psychologically abusive, and that's incredibly difficult to prove in a way that the court will act on. She's goading you. She wants you to lash out, to send an angry text to call her. Don't do it. Everything you do from now on has to be through me. We will log this incident. We will document everything. Her arrogance will be her downfall." Cassandra took a deep breath, clutching the cold silver rattle in her hand. Chen was right. This wasn't just about passion or misplaced love. This was a calculated power play. Jessica wasn't some lovesick girl. She was a predator, and she was enjoying the hunt. She wanted to see Cassandra broken, to see her crawl away with nothing. That evening, Cassandra took the silver rattle and the card, placed them in an evidence bag and handed it to Chen's paralegal. She was done being the victim. She was done being afraid. Jessica Lang wanted a war, and she had no idea who she was fighting. Cassandra Donovan wasn't just a pregnant wife. She was an architect. She knew how to build things, but she also knew that sometimes to build something new and strong, you had to first be willing to burn the old structure to the ground. And she was finally ready to light the match. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived on a humid, oppressive August morning. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse was a hive of quiet misery, its hallways filled with people on the worst days of their lives. Cassandra, now nearly 8 months pregnant, felt conspicuous and vulnerable. The baby was pressing on her ribs, making each breath a conscious effort. David Chen walked beside her, a calming presence, his briefcase filled with the financial documents that told the real story of her marriage. The purpose of the hearing was to set temporary support orders, alimony for her, and crucially, prenatal and future child support. It was a trial in miniature, a preview of the main event to come. Roland and his lawyer Peterson were already seated at the plaintiff's table when they entered. Roland looked haggard, but he wore a bespoke suit, a carefully crafted costume of success that contradicted the narrative of financial ruin he was about to present. He refused to meet Cassandra's eyes, focusing instead on a point on the far wall. But it was the figure in the public gallery that made Cassandra's breath catch. Jessica Lang was sitting in the front row, directly in Roland's line of sight. She was dressed not in a flashy, inappropriate manner, but in a subtle, expensive, dark grey sheath dress, her hair pulled back in a severe professional bun. She looked like a supportive corporate wife, an image so calculated it was chilling. She offered Cassandra a small, pitying smile as she sat down, an expression that said, "Look at you all alone and pregnant. Look at me, the woman who holds his future." The hearing began. Peterson painted a grim picture of Roland's financial situation. He presented doctored pay stubs and a letter from Roland's firm, likely co-signed by a complicit superior, stating that due to a corporate restructuring, his commission-based income had been eliminated for the foreseeable future. He was now, Peterson argued, on a modest base salary that barely covered his own living expenses. "Your Honor," Peterson argued, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "Mr. Donovan is heartbroken about the dissolution of his marriage, but he cannot be expected to provide a lifestyle that he himself can no longer afford. He is prepared to offer a token amount of support for the child, but any spousal support is at this time completely out of the question." It was a masterful performance of lies. When it was Chen's turn, he methodically began to dismantle it. He presented Roland's income statements from the previous 3 years, showing a consistent and substantial 6-figure earning history. He introduced the corporate expense reports Sarah had uncovered. "Your Honor," Chen said, his voice, "even Mr. Donovan claims poverty. Yet, in the last 6 months, his corporate American Express has been used for over $40,000 in expenses that appear to be personal in nature. Dinners for 2 at Bernardine's Weekend Hotel, stays purchases at Neiman Marcus. Are these the expenditures of a man facing financial ruin?" Peterson was on his feet instantly. "Objection. Those are legitimate business development expenses, Your Honor. Mr. Donovan's job requires him to entertain clients." The judge, a stern, sharp-eyed woman in her late 50s, named Maria Sanchez, peered over her glasses. "Sustained for now. But Mr. Chen, I trust you will connect these dots at the formal trial. For today, I am focused on declared income and immediate needs." Judge Sanchez seemed unimpressed by the theatrics from either side. She was all business, the hearing ground on a tedious back and forth of financial jargon. Cassandra felt a wave of despair. It was all so technical, so devoid of the human cost. They were talking about her life, her child's future in terms of assets and liabilities. All the while she could feel Jessica's eyes on her, a steady, unnerving gaze of triumph. During a brief recess, as Cassandra stood in the hallway trying to catch her breath, Jessica accidentally bumped into her near the water fountain. "Oh, I am so sorry," Jessica said, her voice a sickly sweet whisper. "You have to be careful in your condition. It's also taxing." She looked down at Cassandra's swollen belly, a flicker of something cold and calculating in her eyes. "Roland is so worried. He just wants this to be over so he can move on. We can move on. You should just take whatever he's offering. It would be so much less stressful for, you know." She gestured vaguely at Cassandra's stomach. The threat was implicit. "Drop this, or the stress will harm your baby." Cassandra looked her directly in the eye. "The only thing that is stressful, Jessica, is watching a grown man lie under oath while his mistress watches from the gallery like it's a Broadway show. Tell Roland his performance needs work." Jessica's smile tightened. The mask of feigned concern fell away, revealing the raw animosity beneath. "You're a fool if you think this ends well for you. You're yesterday's news." Before Cassandra could respond, the bailiff called them back into the courtroom. The judge was ready to make her temporary ruling. Judge Sanchez looked from Roland to Cassandra. "Based on the submitted financial declarations," she began, "and pending a more thorough review at trial, I am ordering Mr. Donovan to pay temporary spousal support in the amount of $2,000 per month and to cover all prenatal medical expenses. A child support order will be determined upon the birth of the child." A gasp came from Jessica in the gallery. It was a small, almost inaudible sound, but in the quiet courtroom, it was like a siren. Peterson immediately began to protest, but Judge Sanchez cut him off with a sharp rap of her gavel. "This is a temporary order, Mr. Peterson. I suggest your client find a way to comply. We are adjourned." As they left the courtroom, Cassandra didn't feel victorious. $2,000 was a fraction of what she was entitled to, and it barely covered the mortgage. It was a temporary reprieve, not a win. Roland stormed past her without a word, his face pale with fury. Jessica followed close behind, placing a proprietary hand on his arm. As they passed, she shot Cassandra one last look, a look that promised this was far from over. This was just the opening skirmish on a battlefield where Jessica Lange was determined to be the last woman standing. 2 months later, the main trial began. Cassandra was 9 months pregnant, her due date a mere week away. Walking into the same courtroom felt different this time. The preliminary hearing had been a rehearsal. This was the final performance. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her large belly a constant physical reminder of what was at stake. David Chen, ever the steadying presence, carried 2 large briefcases, overflowing with files, the ammunition for the war ahead. Roland and his lawyer were already there, a familiar tableau of grim determination. But today the gallery was more crowded. A few of Cassandra's friends had come for support, sitting on the left side. On the right behind Roland sat Jessica Lange, holding court. She wasn't alone. She had brought 2 of her own friends, 2 women who looked like carbon copies of her, sharp, stylish, and radiating an aura of untouchable privilege. They whispered behind their hands, occasionally glancing towards Cassandra and smirking. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Judge Maria Sanchez entered her face as impassive as granite, and the proceedings began. The first day was a grueling examination of financial records. David Chen and the forensic accountant, Sarah, took the stand, presenting their findings with meticulous detail. They showed the flow of money from Roland's business accounts into shell entities. They presented evidence of the Porsche lease, the lavish trips, the designer purchases, a lifestyle completely at odds with his claim of near poverty. Peterson Roland's lawyer was skilled at creating doubt. He cross-examined Sarah relentlessly, trying to portray her as a hired gun who was misinterpreting standard business practices. "So a business lunch with a potential client is now considered fraud, in your expert opinion, Ms. Jones?" he'd ask with dripping sarcasm. Roland took the stand late in the afternoon. Under Peterson's gentle questioning, he played the part of the beleaguered, heartbroken man. He spoke of the unbearable stress of his high-pressure job and the unfortunate but mutual breakdown of his marriage. He framed the affair with Jessica as a symptom of the marriage's end, not the cause. "I made mistakes," he said, looking at the judge with practiced sincerity. "But I am not a wealthy man. I am trying to rebuild my life just as Cassandra is. All I want is to provide what is fair for my child based on what I can actually afford." Cassandra watched him, a stranger in her husband's skin, weaving a tapestry of lies with such conviction that for a terrifying moment she almost doubted her own reality. She could feel the baby shifting inside her, a restless, churning energy that mirrored her own. The first day ended without a clear victory for either side. As they were packing up, Cassandra overheard one of Jessica's friends whisper loudly, "I can't believe he has to pay for her at all. She's the one who let herself go." The words were meant for her to hear. She flinched as if struck. She ignored them, letting David lead her out of the courtroom. The second day was even more intense. It was Chen's turn to cross-examine Roland. He started calmly asking about his employment, his salary, his stated expenses. Then he began to introduce the evidence of his hidden life. "Mr. Donovan," Chen said, holding up a photograph. "Do you recognize this woman?" It was a picture of Jessica smiling on a beach. "Yes, that's Jessica Lange," Roland said, his voice tight. "And she is your current partner, correct? We are in a relationship, yes." Chen then produced the Tiffany & Curbisser receipt for the baby rattle. "Did you purchase this item for Ms. Lang to send to your wife?" Roland shifted in his seat. Yes. We thought it would be a nice gesture." "A nice gesture," Chen repeated, letting the absurdity of the phrase hang in the air. "Sending an unsolicited gift from your mistress to your pregnant wife, you consider that a nice gesture?" Peterson objected, but the damage was done. Chen moved on, chipping away at Roland's credibility question by question. He presented the social media posts, the pictures of the Porsche, the receipts for romantic getaways. With each piece of evidence, Roland's story began to unravel. He became flustered, contradicting his earlier testimony, claiming he couldn't recall specific dates or expenses. The judge called for a mid-morning recess. The tension in the room was palpable. As Cassandra slowly stood up to stretch her aching back, her friends huddled around her, offering water and quiet words of encouragement. Across the aisle, Jessica and her friends were laughing. It was a low, cruel sound. Then Jessica stood up, as if to stretch her own legs, and took a few steps into the center aisle. She was directly in Cassandra's line of sight. She placed a hand on her own flat stomach, then looked pointedly at Cassandra's 9-month belly. In a stage whisper designed to carry across the hushed courtroom, she said to her friend, loud enough for at least half the room, and most importantly, Cassandra to hear, "Look at her waddling in here, trying to get sympathy with that belly. It's pathetic. He'll have a real family soon. One that isn't built on trapping a man." The world went silent. The air was sucked out of Cassandra's lungs. The casual cruelty, the public humiliation. It was more devastating than any legal argument. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. Her friend started to rush to her defense, but Cassandra just stood there, frozen, the echo of Jessica's words ringing in her ears. The bailiff, a burly man who had seen everything, shot Jessica, a look of pure venom. Even Peterson seemed to cringe. It was a brazen, foolish act of malice, but what no one had counted on was that Judge Maria Sanchez had returned to the bench a moment early to retrieve a file. She had been standing in the doorway unseen by the gallery. She had heard every single word. Her face, usually a mask of judicial neutrality, was now set in lines of cold, controlled fury. She didn't say a word. She simply walked to her chair, her eyes fixed on Jessica Lang with an intensity that could melt steel. The mocking had been a grave miscalculation. Jessica, in her arrogance, had just made a powerful and unforgiving enemy. The recess was over, and everything was about to change. When the trial resumed after the recess, the very air in the courtroom seemed to have changed. The lazy afternoon light filtering through the tall windows now seemed harsh and interrogative. Judge Sanchez's return to the bench was a study in quiet intensity. The brief flicker of fury Cassandra had seen in the doorway was gone, replaced by a profound and unnerving calm. It was the stillness of a deep ocean before a tsunami. Cassandra felt a tremor of something unfamiliar, not hope that felt too fragile, but a sense of impending consequence. Across the room, Jessica Lang had composed herself, but a brittle quality now underscored her confidence. Her smile was fixed, her posture rigid. She had fired a poisoned arrow and was now watching to see if it had hit its mark, utterly oblivious to the fact that she had provoked a far more powerful adversary. Roland Donovan resumed his place on the stand, seemingly unaware of the shift. He was buoyed by his own performance, convinced he was successfully portraying the role of a wronged man pushed to his limits. David Chen continued his cross-examination, his voice a steady, rhythmic chipping away at the fortress of Roland's lies. He presented the last of his major evidence, a series of bank transfers from one of Roland's undeclared shell corporations to an account held solely by Jessica Lang. The memo line on each transfer simply read, "Consulting fees." "Mr. Donovan." Chen asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Can you tell the court what sort of consulting services Ms. Lang, a mergers and acquisition specialist at your own firm, provided to your private holding company?" Roland cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Jessica is brilliant. She offered strategic advice on potential private investments." "I see," Chen said, letting the lie breathe in the silent room. "And did you declare this business relationship, this exchange of thousands of dollars to your firm's compliance department, as is required? It was a private venture." Roland snapped his composure, finally beginning to fray. "It has no bearing on this." "It has every bearing, Mr. Donovan. It shows a pattern of financial entanglement and a lack of transparency." Peterson Rowland's lawyer rose for his redirect, sensing his client was losing ground. He needed to end the day on a high note to re-establish the narrative of Rowland as the victim. He approached the stand with a look of paternal sympathy. "Rowland." He began using his client's first name to create a sense of intimacy. "You've been subjected to a barrage of accusations. Let's bring this back to the simple truth. You've been portrayed as a man living a life of secret luxury. Can you tell the court one last time, under oath, what your actual financial state is today?" Roland seized the lifeline. He turned his body slightly to face the judge, his expression a carefully crafted mask of earnest sincerity. "I'm barely staying afloat, Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with feigned emotion. "My debts are piling up. I drive a modest car. I live in a small rented apartment. After my basic expenses for survival are met, my discretionary spending is nearly zero. I simply don't have the money Mr. Chen claims I do." He finished the performance with a slight shake of his head, as if bewildered that anyone could think otherwise. He dared a glance at Jessica, who gave him the smallest, most affirming nod. Judge Sanchez watched him. Her fingers steepled her face, an unreadable cipher. She allowed a full 10 seconds of silence to pass after Peterson said, "No further questions." Then, just as David Chen was about to rise, the judge held up a single, slender hand. "Stay seated, Mr. Chen," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet room. She leaned forward, the fabric of her black robes rustling. Her focus narrowed entirely onto the man in the witness box. "Mr. Donovan," she began, her tone disarmingly soft. "I have just a few questions for you myself. You testified under penalty of perjury that your discretionary spending is nearly zero. Is that correct?" Roland, visibly relieved to be questioned by the judge instead of Chen, straightened his posture. "Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely correct. And you reiterated just now that you drive a modest car and live in a modest apartment." "Yes, Your Honor. A 3-year-old Ford Fusion and a 1-bedroom rental in North Charlotte." He was adding details, now trying to sell the lie with specificity. The judge nodded slowly. Her eyes drifted for just a fraction of a second over Roland's shoulder to the gallery. She didn't look at Jessica, but rather at the gleaming, ostentatious watch on her wrist and the ridiculously expensive designer handbag resting in her lap. Then her gaze snapped back to Roland, and the softness in her voice vanished, replaced by a core of pure steel. "Then can you please explain to this court?" She asked, each word delivered with chilling precision, the purchase of a 2025 Porsche Taycan, valued at $110,000, registered last month to a Ms. Jessica Lang at her address, for which the $5,000 down payment was made from an account in the Cayman Islands traced back to a shell corporation owned by you. The silence that followed was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical presence, a heavy, crushing weight that pressed down on every person in the room. The question was a masterpiece of legal annihilation. It wasn't an accusation. It was a verdict delivered as an inquiry. The judge hadn't just discovered a secret. She had mapped its entire anatomy, the make, the model, the value, the date, the recipient, the fraudulent account, the offshore location, and the direct link back to him. Cassandra stared, her mind struggling to process the sheer, devastating completeness of it all. She felt a gasp leave her own lips, soft and shaky. Roland Donovan's face went through a rapid, horrifying transformation. The confident mask melted away, revealing the terrified, fraudulent man beneath. The color drained from his skin, leaving it a waxy, sickly white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock, but no sound emerged. His eyes, wide with panic, darted from the impassive face of the judge to his lawyer. Peterson was frozen. The lawyer, the shark, was utterly stunned. His mouth was agape, his carefully prepared notes forgotten on the table before him. He had been prepared to fight the battles he knew about. This was an ambush from the one person in the room. He couldn't fight. In the gallery, a sharp metallic clatter broke the silence. Jessica Lange's designer handbag had slipped from her white-knuckled grasp and hit the floor. The mask of smug superiority had not just fallen. It had been shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Her face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated terror. The Porsche, her ultimate trophy, the symbol of her victory over Cassandra, had just become the anchor that would drown them both. Your Honor, that, Roland finally stammered, his voice a hoarse croak. That's a business asset, for client transportation. The lie was so pathetic, so desperate, that it was almost pitiful. A business asset registered to your girlfriend, Mr. Donovan. Judge Sanchez cut him off, her voice dripping with contempt. An asset you failed to declare on any of your sworn financial statements submitted to this court. An asset purchased with offshore funds, while you were simultaneously claiming you could not afford to support your unborn child. Every question was a nail being hammered into the coffin of his case. Perjury, contempt of court, financial fraud. The words hung in the air unspoken, but understood by everyone. I can explain. Roland choked out, his facade completely crumbled. I'm sure you can, Judge Sanchez said, her voice dropping to a dangerously low level that promised retribution. And you will have the opportunity to do so. Perhaps to the district attorney's office. In my 20 years on this bench, Mr. Donovan, I have rarely seen such a flagrant and insulting attempt to defraud a spouse and mislead this court. Perjury and financial fraud are serious criminal offenses. This court does not take them lightly. It was over. Utterly and completely over. Peterson, jolted back to life by the mention of criminal charges, scrambled to his feet. Your Honor, we request an immediate recess to discuss this matter. Judge Sanchez granted it with a curt nod. As the bailiff escorted a shaking, hollowed-out Roland from the witness stand, he didn't dare look at Cassandra. He couldn't. His gaze fell upon Jessica, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. But she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the judge, her face a mask of dawning horror, as she realized her role in this was not just that of a mistress, but of a co-conspirator. The aftermath was a swift and brutal surrender. In the judge's chambers with Roland and a frantic Peterson, there was no negotiation. There were only terms. To avoid the judge formally referring the case for criminal prosecution, they would have to agree to every single one of David Chen's original demands, and then some. An hour later, they emerged. Cassandra stood tall as David Chen outlined the final binding settlement. She was awarded sole and exclusive ownership of the house, free and clear. Roland's claims were extinguished. He was ordered to pay a significant monthly child support payment a figure the judge had calculated based on his true income, backed by the evidence she had uncovered. He was to pay a lump sum spousal support payment so large it would liquidate nearly every asset he had left. And finally, he was ordered to pay every last cent of Cassandra's legal fees. Cassandra walked out of the courthouse into the warmth of the late afternoon sun. Her friends surrounded her, their faces streaked with tears of relief. For the first time in nearly a year, the crushing weight on her chest was gone. She took a deep, clean breath, filling her lungs with the air of freedom. She didn't look back at the building that had housed so much of her pain. She didn't need to see Roland's ruin or Jessica's panicked retreat. Their story had reached its squalid end. Hers was finally ready to begin. 1 week later, in the peaceful, sterile quiet of a hospital room, Cassandra gave birth to a perfectly healthy, beautiful baby girl. She named her Lily. As she held her daughter so small and new against her chest, she felt a wave of profound peace. The fierce battle was over. The lies were silenced. The mocking was a distant, meaningless echo. She had not only survived, she had triumphed. She had protected her child, reclaimed her life, and emerged from the fire not scorched, but forged anew. She was an architect, and before her lay the beautiful, promising blueprint of a future she would design all on her own. That single question from a discerning judge didn't just win Cassandra a court case, it reclaimed her life. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes, in the face of overwhelming deceit and cruelty, the truth has a way of making itself heard. Cassandra and her daughter Lily built a new life, one filled with peace and genuine happiness, far from the shadows of betrayal. Roland and Jessica's world built on lies crumbled. They faced not only financial ruin but a federal investigation for fraud. Cassandra's story is a testament to the strength of a mother fighting for her child and the quiet power of justice. If her journey from heartbreak to triumph resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder that integrity can win. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories of justice and resilience. And please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed a moment where one simple truth changed everything? We'd love to hear your story.